It's my 1-year anniversary on Booktube, and I got some Q&A. But first, I have some questions for my viewers. One is that it's been baffling me. Why do you press harder on a remote control when you know it's dead? And why do they call it beauty sleep when you wake up looking terrible? And most of all, why is there an expiration date on sour cream? Aloha Booktube, it's Marilyn Maya, otherwise known as the Baby Boomer Booktuber. And yes, this is my Q&A. I put out a comment asking for questions about me, and I did get a few, so let's get to it. My good friend Larry from Larry Has Opinions asked, I'd love to hear more about the places you lived in and what you loved and hated the most about each place. Well, as most of you know, I just hit my 71st birthday and I've lived in a lot of places. So quickly, I will go down the list of the places I lived and the best and worst about all of them. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And what is there to say that's good about New York? When it's good, it's very, very good. And when it's bad, it's terrible. But right now it's in its terrible phase. And when I left, it was also in a bad phase in 1976. But when it's good, it has the best of everything you want. It has a beautiful park, Central Park in the middle of the city that goes on for acres and acres. It has the best musical plays, written plays. It has the best restaurants in the world and some of the most intelligent people that I've ever met. So I love New York when it's good. And when it's bad, like it is now, there's a lot of crime and it's dirty and the subways are horrible and dirty and they don't smell very good with the rats and everything else. So what can I say about New York that hasn't already been said a million times? So yeah, I love New York, but I don't want to live there right now or maybe ever. So that's the good and bad about New York. Then I lived in Madrid, Spain. Why I went there is what's good about it. And that was the flamenco. I wanted to dance flamenco and I wanted to be a dancer. That didn't exactly work out for me, but I was able to see the beautiful Prado Museum and see flamenco shows at the tablaos, which are like the nightclubs for flamenco. And it's beautiful. It has a lot of beautiful buildings and the Gran Via, which is the major street in Madrid, and beautiful parks and fountains, and it's beautiful. What was bad about it was different when I lived there than when I came back to visit. What was bad about it in 1973, 72, 73, was that no woman would speak to me because I was considered a very bad woman because I traveled alone without a male escort, which was very unusual even in this country, within my circle of friends at the time. So only men spoke to me. But well, the men were cute, so I learned Spanish, and that was good, which I already knew Spanish, but I was able to really get fluent in Spanish, and that was also good. So that's Madrid, España, Madrid. Then I moved to Hawaii, but so let's talk about Hawaii. I'm going to talk about Hawaii last because I live here still. After I came to Hawaii, I wanted to get my degree, so I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where two of my children still live in St. Paul. And what's good about that city, and I'm talking about when I moved there in the 90s, probably 90, 91. What was good about it was very clean. It was very safe then, not so much anymore. They had wonderful breakfasts, wonderful colleges and education, and people on the most part were friendly. All right, let's get to the bad part. There was a lot of prejudice in the Twin Cities against me because two of my children were mixed race. And they would ask me, they would come simpering at me and say, "Oh, your children are so cute. Are they adopted?" And I would say, "No." And then they would give me a weird look and just back away from me. Like, adoption was fine, but having a biological mixed race child was not. So, and also, I had moved to a very white neighborhood because I had just been looking for good schools. So I ended up living in a town that's very diverse now, but at that time, Bloomington, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis, the schools were supposed to be the best in the world. And I lived in an apartment building where I heard so many N-words that I had to speak up about, which didn't exactly make me beloved in the building, but I didn't care. But because I was white presenting, if they didn't see my children with me, people would just be throwing out prejudice, racism. Racism was rife, and that came to brew this, a couple of years ago, what happened, a horrible thing that happened in Minneapolis. I forgot the worst thing about Minneapolis. It's cold. It's very cold. And there's a lot of snow. And if you're not good at walking in snow, you will fall down and you will hurt yourself. If you're lucky enough to fall in soft snow, then it's not so bad. And I fell backwards in soft snow many a time. And it's like hard to get up. It's almost like, it's like quicksand. All right, so then, then I moved to Japan in 2002. I went there because my youngest daughter had lived there for 7 years teaching, and she said if I wanted to see Japan, that I should come and visit her. I ended up staying 3 years because I was 50 then, and older women, to be honest, 50 is considered old for a teacher in Japan. 50 is considered old anyway, and they make you retire at a certain age. I forgot what year it was, but it wasn't much after 50. I hope things are changing now. So I became enamored with Japan. When I went there just to visit, I ended up being, pursued for a job because I was an English teacher, in the sense of English as a foreign language. I had a certificate, and they wanted me and they were willing to pay me. And that's one of the good things about Japan, is that if you're a teacher, you're called sensei, which is a honorific, what they call lawyers and doctors sensei as well. And they actually pay you for what you're worth. And that was a very different experience for me, having worked in social work most of my life. So beside that, I felt like when I landed in Japan, I felt like I was in a place like nowhere else on the world. It was almost like landing on the moon for me, because everything was so different. And I was very smart in one thing, in that I studied a little bit of the language before I went there. So I had a little bit of an easier time getting along, though my Japanese never really progressed above a certain level. Though, I had basic Japanese conversation after 3 years, which is not really saying much. Okay, so what else did I put down? Well, I lived in Kobe, Japan, and the bread is good, believe it or not, because there was a Western settlement there. it's a port city, so they had the best bread I've ever tasted, except maybe my grandmother's challah. What did I hate? Running for trains. There was cultural barriers. When I went there, some of the toilets were Japanese style, where you had to squat. And I don't know, the young girls would just run in, run out. I don't know how they managed their clothes. And I would invariably come out the worse for wear, let's put it that way. And I can't say there was much to hate about Japan, really. I really could have lived there longer. But there's another story that goes into that and has to do with a man. So I won't go into that. All right, so that's the questions from, I hope, Larry, you know a little bit more about me now. Now we go to Brian at Bookish. Brian is a wonderful booktuber as well. He's a very prolific, he's a retired history teacher. So I learn a lot from his channel. And he wants to know, regarding a rock and roll shirt that I was wearing, since you are wearing a rock band t-shirt, if you can go see any 3 musical acts, past or present, at any point in time, which acts would you choose to go see? My mother never let me see concerts, except one that was in the afternoon, which I'll come back to in a minute. But if I can see any concert, and I'm so sorry I didn't get to see her, it would be Janice Joplin. I was really, I had a obsession with Janice Joplin's music, her persona, her, everything she was, which of course I didn't know about the drugs or anything in my little world of really, they say if you remember the 60s, you weren't there. But I was there, I promise. I just never really liked drugs in the sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. And since I was married, well, the first part too. Okay, the second person I would love to see, and I don't know if I could have seen him or not if I was too young, but it's Otis Redding. A friend of mine introduced me to his first album, and I think that was in 1970, I'm thinking 71, right before I went to Madrid, in fact. And I just fell in love with his voice, his music, and I've been in love with him ever since. I mean, I think he was, if he could have had a chance to really come into his own, as a singer and get old, I think, he would be as big as Prince or Stevie Wonder or anyone else, really. Then I thought I'd like to see Elvis, because when I was a young child, I saw Jailhouse Rock, the movie. I was like 5, and I was also just enamored with him. I had a big crush on him, and I forced my mother, or tried to force her, to buy me I Love Elvis button, which was very popular then, but unfortunately she only bought me the cheaper I Love Elvis in letters. My mother was like that. I think I would have liked to see Prince, because I lived in Minneapolis and I passed the nightclub, First Avenue, where he used to perform. But by the time he was performing, where he was out of First Avenue, I was, when I was in Minnesota. But I did run into him when I lived in Bloomington. And that's another story for another time. But let's just say that I was mostly in my pajamas, and he came in a purple limousine, and I chased him around the little convenience store where he was trying to buy some Kleenex poofs or something like that. And I kept on following him, but I was too shy to say anything. And he was dressed all in purple, and he lived in, I think, Chasen, which was one town, I forgot the name of it, if it was Chasen or something like that, which was one town further out from Bloomington at the time, where he had his studio. I think he still, you know, there's, when he died, that's where he died, in that place. So I acted very weird, and he was scared of me, basically. But I would have loved to see him in concert, other than television. And now it comes back to when I was around, now I don't remember the year. If I could have been 11 or 12 or 13. I'm not sure, but we used to have Easter shows at the Paramount Theater in Brooklyn. I'm pretty sure it's called the Paramount. And I went there to see the Four Seasons. They were headlining the Easter show, because that's what they had at that time. And everyone was there. And that was the only concert that I saw at, you know, when I was young. That was the only concert I saw, and I'll tell you who I saw. I saw, I just read what my boyfriend put on this. So, okay, I saw a teenage Stevie Wonder playing fingertips. Jackie Wilson. I don't know if you know who Jackie Wilson is, but he had like a high voice, high-pitched voice at the end of all his songs. And Wilson Pickett, who also had more of a rough kind of voice, and he was just starting out. And of course, the Four Seasons, which were wonderful. Then there was, now I'm thinking it had to be 63, because there was an act there called the English Beatles. They were not good, and they never got anywhere. And my boyfriend put down the Monkees. I loved the Monkees, but I don't know if I would have wanted to see them in concert. I saw them on television when I was 15, and he loves Ozzy Osbourne, who unfortunately I didn't know existed at that time. And, you know, he'll never let me forget it. Okay, now, so thank you, Brian. I hope I've answered your question. I have a lot of long stories for every question, so it doesn't matter how many people ask me questions. Okay, now Margaret Pinard asked me, she had the hardest questions. Do you have a title for your current memoir? My first memoir was called From Agoraphobia to Zen. And it's still around, at least things about it are still around on Google and such. But I was going to name my memoir Sanity Sucks. I didn't like that. And then Pretty Ugly. And I'm sort of getting cold on that one too. So I'm not sure yet, let's put it that way. But I'm pretty good at titles, so I'm pretty sure I'll find a good I'll come up with a good title. Now, her other question is a very easy question. I know Hawaii has both, but if you had to choose for a vacation, mountain or beach, what would you choose? And it'll always be beach. I live near the beach and the mountains, as I said in my first vlog, that I live so far out west that the mountains are right here, which you can't see, and the beach, where is the beach? Is right there. So, beach, mountain. Malka Makai. Malka means mountains. Makai is ocean. So I live next to both, but yes, I prefer beach. I love beach, even though I can't swim very well. Her other question was, what is your favorite book, fiction or non, about New York City? And I had to do a little research for this because I knew what my favorite was. You know, I always talk about A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but that's not really about New York. That's more about a coming-of-age story in Brooklyn, New York. And I think, when I think of what is a New York favorite of mine, I don't usually think of Brooklyn. Because Brooklyn people, you know, Brooklynese, horrible, terrible, water. I can't even say my own language. Water. You know, we think of ourselves as a different species almost from Manhattanites or people from Queens, like Jackson sitting over there with his umbrella. Okay, so then I thought about a book that I saw the movie first and then I read the book later on. And it's called Auntie Mame. And Rosalind Russell played her in the movie. And it was written by Patrick Dennis. And I love that movie and I love the book. So that was a New York book written, I think it was in the 40s, 50s. You have to see the movie. It's just wonderful too. And the book. I remember the movie better than the book in that case. But when I think of my favorite New York words, it's not a book. It comes from a playwright called Neil Simon. And I'm about to purchase his whole volume of plays, because of anyone that I can think of, his movies and plays made me laugh the most, and I love to laugh. So I'm going to tell you a few of the plays that I love. And well, he wrote New York-based plays, most of them. Barefoot in the Park, my favorite movie of all time, which was The Goodbye Girl, and also a favorite movie, The Odd Couple, and other movies. He has a couple from Brooklyn too. One is Come Blow Your Horn, which was his first play, I think, or first movie, and I didn't care for that as much as I think he had something called Brighton Beach too. So his Brooklyn ones I didn't like as much as I liked about his New York ones, except maybe Plaza Suite, which I liked some of the stories but not all. But you have to check out Neil Simon in some form. And since I love books the best, I'm going to check out, of course, I want to see The Goodbye Girl. Richard Dreyfuss won an Oscar for his part, and I think Marsha Mason deserved one too. She was Neil Simon's wife, so she was wonderful in that, and she's still here with us. Well, Neil Simon died recently. I didn't know that until I was checking this out. My last question was from AC, and he asks, or she asks, why did you move to Hawaii? And I'll answer that question by saying that what I was talking about before, in that Hawaii was going through a really, really bad time in the 70s. In some ways worse than it is now, believe it or not. And I had small children, I was divorced, and I wanted them to grow up in a more wholesome place. And at that time, Times Square, if you're familiar with Times Square, was a terrible place. It was X-rated movies and hookers and strip joints, and everything was XXX. Yet I worked like a few blocks away on 39th Street, which was the garment district. So I had to get off at Times Square station and walk through that, see the pimps and it was not good. So I didn't want my children to grow up in New York. I had 2 by that time, and then I came here and I got married and had 2 more. But that's why I came to Hawaii. Well, that's not why I came to Hawaii specifically, but that's why I wanted to leave New York. Why did I come to Hawaii specifically? Well, I'm a very impulsive person, and there was a neighbor who lived next door to me in Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, if you're familiar with Brooklyn. And she said to me, her daughter was a nurse, and her daughter went on a nurses' convention. And when her daughter came back, she just made an offhand remark to me. I was working at that place on 39th Street at the time, and she said, Marilyn, it's a wonderful place to raise kids. I went out the next day and bought a one-way ticket for 6 months in advance. And it was quite expensive at that time. It was cost what it costs now, but the money was worth much more. So I came on a whim, and people said I would come back in 6 months, but they were wrong. And I'm still here. So I hope you like the answers to my Q&A. If you have any other people, other viewers want to ask questions, I still have a few days to go before it's the end of my first-year anniversary. So please ask them in the comments, though I think you know a lot about me already. So until we meet again, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in another video very soon, because I have a lot of ideas coming up. So until we meet again, my friend, aloha.